Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. I am joined as ever by my favourite co-host, Sir, the Air Service's kind of calming dog. Say hello, Sir.
Hello, Sud.
I'm also joined, this is nonsense, I'm also joined by my other co-host, very much the second favourite, Jake Nelson. Jake, how are you?
I'll take it, Adam.
This is actually, just to break the fourth wall as we completely dissipate up our own backside, the second attempt we've made at recording this podcast. Initially, we tried to do it yesterday when we were working from home, like remotely, because of the rain bomb. But I think it was my internet, my 4G dongle went down. Pretty annoying as we had some pretty good gags and not any good insight with some pretty good gags. We're going to try and repeat, so we're going to seem surprised. Anyway, we decided to scrap that because Jake was, as we're recording this Thursday, sort of early morning, was due to go and see the arrival of Qantas' first A321 XLR. However, that kind of big media event got cancelled due to the wild weather. The whole thing's been an absolute mess this week. Jake, how are you? You got anything to say?
I'm dry, Adam, and
You're dry.
I think that's the main thing we can say for anyone at this point.
Yeah, I'm dry as well, so that's all right. But because it was the rain bomb, and the interesting thing is, initially this whole rain bomb thing was just something the Daily Mail came out with. It's like rain bomb, and then yesterday it was like bomb hit Sydney, which is exaggerating. To an extreme.
I think bombogenesis is another term that the Bureau of Meteorology uses.
Is it. So this is what I don't know, because initially, like a year or two ago, the tabloids started saying rain bomb. Now the bomb are like, well, actually, it is a kind of rain bomb because, like you say, there's some apparently technical term for it. I'm not entirely convinced it wasn't just created by journalists, and the bomb people have like jumped on board it. Anyway, the wild weather in Sydney has caused all sorts of chaos.
So apparently, I'm looking at in Google now. I'm looking here at Google now.
Live journalism, as
this is from Reuters. A bomb cyclone, also referred to as explosive cyclogenesis or bombogenesis, is a mid-latitude cyclone that has rapidly intensified. A cyclone is a low-pressure weather system with winds rotating inward, where it circulates in a counterclockwise direction in the northern hemisphere, clockwise in the southern hemisphere. So, to be clear, there's a cyclone as distinct from Cyclone Tracy or Cyclone Yasi or whichever other. A cyclone is in a low-pressure weather system, not as in a hurricane. Yeah,
I always find it quite amusing that the Aussies always mock the British because on like the one day of the year it hits like 30 degrees, we all fall apart. I could make the claim the other way, that this is what we would just call a storm, but here it's a rain bomb and it's coming for you. So it's different.
Well, when England gets like 2 sunny days in a row, that's a sun bomb for you guys.
That is a sun bomb. That is an extraordinary thing. Right. Anyway, enough. I say enough nonsense. It's all nonsense. Have we got any shout outs? Any before we crack into the news? Anyone got in touch?
We did get a rather rude comment on one of our videos, Adam, about soot.
What? He's looking into the camera now.
Obione 79. There's zeros in the name. It might be pronounced Obi-Wan. Actually, now I'm looking at it, but I think I'm going to call him Obione. I'm going to call them Obione because they were rude. Says, why is this grown-ass man sitting there with a stuffed animal? WTF? And first
That's
of all,
horrible.
And first of all, Obione, I think that Adam should have the right to have as many stuffed animals with him as he likes.
And this is different from other stuffed animals because he talks, as we know. Sir, obviously somebody's been very insulted to me and also to you. Have you got a response to that, sir?
Production, can we just put a bleep in at this point? Can we just bleep right after Adam says that?
Look, I like him. But the thing, what you don't understand is he's very calming. He actually feels better than a real dog. He looks very nice.
Cleaner,
yeah, definitely. I've got no regrets at all. So, this grown-ass man will do what he wants. Thank you very much, Obi-Wan.
Or Obione, if that is your real name.
Just some loser in a dungeon on your own. Who's laughing now, eh, mate? That was a bit sinister, actually, wasn't it?
That's a bit harsh, Adam.
No, it's not. He gets what he deserves. We should also mention, as we always do, the upcoming Australian Aviation Summit, which, and I haven't got the laptop in front of me, I believe is happening on August the 14th.
That's it.
The summit, which is supported by our principal partner Leidos, will be headlined by the maestro, Alan Joyce, making one of his first public appearances since he stepped down as the CEO of Qantas. He'll be talking to them all about his experiences of kind of guiding Qantas through the pandemic and kind of 15 years, really, of major change. So if you want to hear from the big man himself, come along to our summit. It is being held at Illumina, which is a fancy new venue at the Martin Place metro station.
Now, to be clear, it's not in the metro. It's not at the metro station itself. It's like above the metro station. It's not. We're not going to be holding it like in the actual metro platforms.
It would be good though if he did his speech like actually on the platform, because there are seats there and people just crowded round.
Well, it'd probably be cheap. And it would run the risk of like well, I think the greatest thing that I learned from Qantas is doom doom doom. The train arriving on platform 1 goes to Tallawong and it is an all-stop service stopping at.
Now, full disclosure, we did that joke yesterday. I think we perfectly recreated it today. Just to clarify, it's not in the metro station. It's on the floors above the metro station. It's a flashy new venue. They got all nice new, LCD screens and all of that stuff. Obviously, very easy to get there, very easy to get home. If you want to book tickets, which you should do, go to australianaviation.com.au, or you can just put Australian Aviation Summit into Google. It will come up with the same thing. In the evening, at the same venue, we have the Australian Aviation Awards, supported by our principal partner UNSW and their School of Aviation. This is one of these kind of flashy black tie dinners. Obviously, if you've been shortlisted, if you're a finalist, you should come along. But even if you haven't, it's a great opportunity to come down, meet people from the industry, have a bit of a laugh. I'll be there, Jake will be there. It'll be good fun. Now
that will be in the metro station. That will actually be on the platforms. Yeah, and it'll be catered by the Macca's upstairs.
Yeah, rather than catering,
we didn't have the budget to hire Illumina for the whole day, so we're heading downstairs into the train station.
Yeah. We're just getting mic'd up. We'll get like a little ghetto blaster or whatever. That'd be great. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it'll be a good laugh. So if you do fancy that, again, australianaviation.com.au, we'll put Australian Aviation Awards into Google. It will come up. You've got another 6 weeks or whatever, 7 weeks to get tickets. Go and come on down.
And something that I didn't mention yesterday.
Go on.
Was
fresh material.
So we've had some feedback on the fact that Alan Joyce will be headlining the summit.
I hope it's good feedback.
It has been a controversial choice.
Go on.
People have been saying that people have been very, very down on Alan Joyce headlining the summit. Some people have been very down on Alan Joyce headlining the summit, but the thing about Alan Joyce is, love him or hate him, he led Qantas for, what was it, 15 years. 15 years.
And
he was
Jetstar for 5 years.
Yeah, he was the one who came up with Jetstar. He led Qantas for 15 years. Whether or not you approve of his tenure, there is a lot we can learn from hearing from his perspective how it went. So
yeah, also, and again, the pros and cons or whatever people say about Alan Joyce, mid-pandemic or early in the pandemic, there was no guarantee that airline and that airline group was going to make it through COVID. Now, you could argue, some would say the government gave them lots of money. They didn't really give them any money. They gave them supplemented flights that they had to put on to keep the country moving during COVID.
And there was JobKeeper as well.
There was JobKeeper, but all companies got that. But in a sense, they weren't necessarily given the kind of bailouts that other major airlines around the world had, which you could argue was a big gamble from the Liberal federal government at the time. The idea that Qantas survived COVID, came back, made record profits, was able to invest in their fleet. You've got to look at the pros and cons of this. They had a very tough year in 2022. So did everybody else. But nonetheless, getting Qantas through that period was a huge accomplishment. I'm sure as well Alan Joyce will freely admit there are some things he got right and there's some things he got wrong. But this is going to be the first time he's going to be able to really talk in depth about those days. And again, everyone in the industry can learn from that. I think all airlines made mistakes during that period. So it's going to be a very interesting chance to learn from probably the person, or maybe him and Jane Halitka, that had maybe the toughest experience of an airline CEO in Australian aviation history. So that's what I say to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, look, like we said, love him or hate him, he has been a monumental figure in the last 2 decades of Australian aviation, and whatever he says is going to be interesting.
Exactly. Go and buy your tickets. Keep us in a job. Right. We got any more shout-outs? Any more requests? Or are we going to stay?
I think that's about it, Adam.
That's about it. Okay, we should probably start off by talking about the rain bomb. We've spoken about the meteorological definitions of the bomb. What kind of carnage has this caused this week for Australian aviation?
Yeah, it was it was a real headache. I mean, I was out in it yesterday, ill-advisedly, and the rain was horizontal.
What does that do to your hair? I imagine your hair is kind of impervious to that.
Yeah, it's impervious to combs as well. But it was not pleasant to go out in, and when I got back to the station to take the train home, it was a 10-minute wait. I've never been more happy to see a Tangara in my life.
A Tangara type of train?
Yeah, the pointy ones.
Right.
So this bomb cyclone, or a rain bomb, or whatever you want to call it.
Or rain.
Yeah, this rain, if you like, and wind. Don't forget the wind, Adam.
The wind.
Yeah. Was a real hazard to flying. As at 5 p.m. yesterday, there had been 38 flights cancelled. I think there was, at least 50 that were cancelled throughout the day as a whole, including the ones that were cancelled after 5 p.m. That includes at least 12 Virgin flights. There were Qantas flights, Jetstar flights. Air Services implemented a ground delay program in Sydney. The airport moved to single runway operations. So it was a bit of a nightmare for aviation.
It also does show, as we've said time and time again, how vulnerable Sydney Airport is to these kind of things. The hope would be when we've got Western Sydney Airport opening, that will help alleviate some of these issues. But it does seem crazy in this day and age that you get, bad weather. And, I would imagine Sydney was down to single runways?
Yeah, it was on single runway.
Yeah, single runway operations. And that is to stop. And I'd probably bodge the science here. This is to prevent against crosswinds, which could literally, in theory, potentially move the aircraft kind of horizontally. So if you have 2 aircraft coming down at a similar time, that could cause a bit of trouble. It's very much a preventatory measure. But yeah, hopefully once we've got a second airport open up, that will alleviate some of the issues. But yet again, we've seen wild weather cause all sorts of issues. We've had for the last few months an incredible run of on-time performance. And we obviously last week when the Huey Award controversially, or I would say outrageously, was awarded to the whole industry for doing a good job. They're definitely going to struggle when the next set of results come out after dealing with this rain bomb and all the weather chaos. But yeah, it does.
To be fair, not the airline's fault.
No, exactly. It's not the airline's fault. That's just part and parcel, unfortunately, of being in Australia.
But we did. It'll be interesting to see because the weather is continuing today.
The weather continues every day.
The weather
that's the sort of joke you come out with.
That's true. But if it continues for long enough, it becomes the climate.
Smart ass.
But the bad weather,
Yeah.
the rain and the wind are sort of continuing today. Not as bad as they were yesterday, I believe. But there was implemented, past Parliament last year, this recovery period for Sydney Airport.
Yep.
So after severe disruption, we have the cap of aircraft movements raised from 80 to 85 per hour for up to 2 hours on any day where there's a severe weather event or other major disruption. So hopefully the recovery period is sort of being able to prove its worth here. 2 hours seems a little short. I think that the recovery period could probably be extended by a few hours because I think 85 movements per hour, up from 80 for 2 hours. That's 10 extra movements.
Yeah, I would imagine though that is, if that goes well, there's a potential there to do some more.
Yeah.
It's also, I would also imagine that, particularly like yesterday where the wild weather went on all day, how much of that they are able to take advantage of, or that it would have been too dangerous of, we don't know. I would imagine though maybe today or tomorrow is when they could up the number of flights. But you found this when you got stranded was it in Brisbane you got stranded? Melbourne. What, same difference, isn't it?
Well, no, not really. I mean, Brisbane's much warmer.
Right. But what you found is that you were like, I'm joking. Jake Nelson, don't you know who I am? Can you just put me on my next flight? And they were like, actually, we can't. There's literally no more spaces available. And that actually will, joking aside, be an issue for some of people that are flying, but they won't be able to get another flight for a couple of days. For most people, that is something they can work around. But obviously, say if it's a flight that you need to get an international flight, that could cause a lot more trouble. But we will definitely keep an eye and see if these new rules do make a difference.
Buy travel insurance.
Yeah.
Buy travel insurance.
Yeah, no, that's actually because your travel insurance actually saved you, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
They didn't cough up front. We had to pay and then got reimbursed, but we did get reimbursed for everything. So
there you go.
Get travel insurance.
There you go. Free advice.
If you can't afford travel insurance, you can't afford to travel.
That's very good advice. But the rain bomb potentially affected. Will it cancel the kind of media event for the arrival of Qantas's A321 XLR?
Yes.
I fear this is something you're going to make me talk about, but I'm going to throw it over to you anyway. I'm going to throw the bomb over to you, see how quickly you throw it back to me.
So that's VH-OGA is the registration. Great Ocean Road, I think, is the name, but I find it fun to call it VH-OGA. So VH-OGA, I believe, is still arriving today, and there was supposed to be a media event at the Qantas hangar. Where got to see the plane, speeches from the Qantas bigwigs, all of that. That has been cancelled because of the rain, but it is still noteworthy because it is the first of these new generation domestic aircraft that Qantas is getting. It's been using the 737s for the 737-800s, I should say, for 20, 25 years now, at least, and so they are getting a bit long in the tooth. Some of the younger ones still have a plenty of life left in them, but the older ones, if you've flown on an older Qantas 737, I'm sure you'd say they're looking pretty clapped out, some of them. And so this new A321 XLR is it left Hamburg at the end of last month, so a couple of days ago, and it's been flying here via Bangkok. And yeah, it's supposed to arrive today, Wednesday, so fingers crossed that happens. But so Qantas has, I'm looking here, 28 on firm order from Airbus, with the option to add more. It's supposed to eventually replace the 737 as you've said here, Adam, the backbone of the Qantas domestic fleet. Qantas will be the first operator of the A321 XLR in the Asia Pacific. It's 5 meters longer than 737-800s, 197 seats, 3,000 kilometers more range. First leg of the delivery flight, 9,600 kilometers, the longest ever operated by a commercial airline for a delivery flight. So,
of that aircraft.
Of that aircraft.
Yeah, to be clear. I don't think I made that clear enough in the copy.
No, it's possibly some 787s or A350s have had longer delivery flights, but certainly of the A321 XLR.
So effectively, and again, I'm going to bodge the science of this. So this is one of the kind of next generation of aircraft that, much like the kind of Dreamliner and like the kind of the newer Airbus aircraft, is kind of made of, the fuselage is made of materials that are both lighter and stronger. And what this effectively means is that they now have a longer range. So one of the things that Qantas said is that at the moment it went from the Airbus factory in Hamburg, and it only had to do one stop up in Bangkok before it comes to Sydney. Traditionally, that was, as Qantas said, that was the sort of thing that would only previously have been able to be done by the kind of monster 4-engine aircraft. So this is
or a Dreamliner or something.
Or a Dreamliner, yeah. So this is actually kind of the next generation.
Not that a Dreamliner would be coming from Airbus.
So kind of long term, having these longer ranges will open up more potential routes to Qantas. It's obviously a much better flying experience as well. And I think I said in the copy, it will be the backbone of the fleet. While they may only have firm orders for 28, the intention, I believe, is this will effectively replace eventually all of the 737-800s. This will be their main aircraft, along with the A220s as well, in terms of flying around. So this will be the main way you get about in Australia. It will be a very, very big moment for Qantas. What they also said kind of quietly, I think, in a kind of note to staff late last week, is they're going to acquire 4 midlife, as they call them, 737-800s from a leasing company, basically to tide them over because of all of the kind of delivery delays that both Airbus and Boeing have experienced. Now, a lot of the delays with Boeing have been due to all the various troubles they've had in the US, which I'm sure you will know about. But Airbus hasn't been unaffected by them as well. And what this basically comes down to is kind of post-COVID supply chain issues. So that's a kind of a talent crisis. It's the process of getting hold of parts. It's also, I would imagine, the fact that a lot of airlines have now plumped for Airbus when they would have plumped for Boeing. So they're dealing with issues. So this delivery of an A321 XLR is reportedly a few months later than they hoped. They're hoping to get another 4 of these this year, and then they will start coming more regularly after that. But Qantas's big idea, which I think was a good idea, is one, to try to get hold of more aircraft as they can. So they're getting these extra 4, but also to kind of renovate or scrub up the cabins of, I think it's about 42, 43, or it will now be more, of their 737s. And what that means is when you go in the aircraft, it will look brand new. It will look very similar to these fancy new aircraft. And that is because Qantas is trying to invest in its customer experience after a tough couple of years and give themselves a kind of real kind of additional selling point over Virgin. So this will be, even though it's not necessarily as sort of famous as a Dreamliner or a 747 or an A380, this aircraft will probably be the most important aircraft in Australia over the next 20 years when they finally all arrive.
Yeah, and I was looking at there was a video that I was watching the other week on YouTube from one of those aviation channels. And it was talking about how the A321 XLR is also, a significant development for international flying because, traditionally the big international routes, like in America, the transatlantic routes, they have been the province of the wide bodies. But the A321 XLR, its range is such that it can go across the Atlantic Ocean with no trouble at all. I think JetBlue might be one of the airlines that's using the A321 XLR in this way.
So effectively, you have narrow body, almost domestic aircraft, and now able to do the kind of trips that were previously the preserve of much larger wide body international aircraft, if you want. So this is the kind of game changer. Longer routes and potentially saving the airlines a lot of money because they'll be burning less fuel as well.
So JetBlue is using the A321 LRs. I think they've got some XLRs on order. Or some may have already arrived. But I'm looking at I've got up here on the tablet here the Qantas range maps for the A321 XLR compared to the 737. So from Sydney, you can get to Hong Kong in an A321 XLR, whereas the 737 could not. The furthest to 737, roughly speaking, the furthest you could get in a 737-800 from Sydney would be somewhere like Bali. But the XLRs could go to Jakarta, they could go to Singapore, they could go to Phuket, Hong Kong, Manila, Bangkok. It's a pretty significant range. If you're talking Melbourne can get to Hong Kong just. Brisbane could get all the way to Tokyo. From Perth, you could get as far away as like Mauritius and Bangalore and Dhaka. Shanghai, right at the edge of its range. So the thing with that is, if you have a route that is too skinny to be operated by a wide body, if you don't Perth to Mauritius, for example, if you don't want to, bung a huge A330 or an A350 or a Dreamliner on that route, but you still want to be flying people to Mauritius for as a holiday destination, you got the A321 XLR right there. And if you configure that with some business class seats, you could potentially have that as like a premium international offering on a route that would not warrant a wide body.
Exactly. And again, this might be blindingly obvious to some of the listeners, but obviously when you put on a flight, in order to make money from it, you need to fill it substantially. So you need to be looking at least 75% of seats need to be filled, maybe 80% or so. Obviously, the issue there is that if only larger aircraft are capable of these longer trips and you're not able to fill them, it doesn't make sense to put on the route. But if you think, hey, you know what, we could probably make this work for half the number of people, then suddenly that route becomes financially viable. So it has the potential to open up new routes for travel that kind of didn't exist before. So it's going to be really interesting to see, as these aircraft arrive and as these aircraft develop, how airlines like Qantas kind of slowly start to change their routes and experiment. But it will offer up a lot of new opportunities for customers. Yeah,
exactly. Keeping on with the Qantas fleet renewals, we have QantasLink has turned to is turning to the Embraer E190 to replace a bunch of a bunch of old Fokkers with Network Aviation. So QantasLink has 15 Fokker 100s in its fleet, average age more than 30 years. And so these tired old Fokkers are going to be replaced.
Oh, stop it. I knew you were doing that. Go on, these tired
are going
old
to be
Fokkers.
replaced with midlife Embraer E190s. So these are going to Network Aviation. They're looking to get about 14 of the E190s up to. And these are the first generation E190s, the kind that you would see flying on the East Coast, at least from Alliance, not the new E190 E2s, which Virgin Australia is getting for Vara over in the West. So also 4 of the Fokker 100s are going to be replaced by A320-200s, which have been snaffled from Jetstar Asia, which is going to be shuttered at the end of this month. So fleet renewal is reaching Network Aviation in the West as well.
Okay, welcome back. So we talked a lot about old Fokkers and fleet renewal. What are we talking about next, Jake?
Well, this is a story that you covered, Adam. We talked a bit about international travel. International visitor numbers are still down on 2019.
Yeah, exactly. So we're now, 3.5 years post the end of COVID or post the end of a lot of restrictions. We are in a situation now where international visitor numbers are substantially down. I think it's like 10% or so, something like that. It's down on where we were on 2019. However, the money that those visitors are spending is increasing, or is actually more than 2019. And so when you crunch the numbers, they believe a lot of this is due to a kind of increase in backpackers on working holiday visas, and also a kind of post-COVID increase in student numbers as well. Now, a lot of this comes from a kind of pent-up demand There was a lot of young people who wanted to go to Australia that planned to do that and kind of shifted their plans back a couple of years. Also, as an aside, whether you agree with Boris Johnson or not, one of the most kind of significant things he did in his short tenure as British Prime Minister was negotiate a new deal with the Australian government that gave British backpackers 3 years in Australia rather than 2, and crucially took away the appalling farm work they had to do.
I think they've done that for travellers from the US as well.
Yeah, and I think maybe
destinations.
Ireland as well.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say this. I went on a date with a girl on Saturday, and she was talking to me about her experience. She was an Irish girl, talking to me about her experience doing farm work back in the day. Apparently she broke her leg on the farm, and the whole thing was a nightmare, and the farmer was dodgy as hell. But anyway, the point is that they relaxed the rules around working holiday visas, and the reason they did this is that obviously, even though they don't have to do their farm work, when they're in the country, they will be working in a lot of the bars and the cafes and the restaurants in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, etc., which in that kind of tail end of COVID, they were really struggling to get hold of staff. So you see an increase in those people due to relaxed regulations, due to that pent-up demand. We've also saw a kind of post-COVID bounce back in international student numbers as well. And again, a lot of people postponed their plans during COVID, because what's the point in doing a course in Australia remotely from another country when you could leave it a year, pay the same amount and have the full Aussie experience? So at the moment, it's kind of working out all right in terms of the overall money they're bringing into the country. That doesn't necessarily help airlines if you've got less potential international travellers. But again, what we're seeing is this kind of post-COVID world is a little bit different to the one that came before. I would also suggest another reason why we've seen traveller numbers slightly down is that even though when we were in Australia, we kind of view travelling anywhere internationally takes a long time, and the Aussies are quite hard to it. A lot of people in a lot of countries see going to Australia is a once in a lifetime thing. Like, nobody from the UK has come to visit me because they're like, oh, it's 24 hours, that's such a long way. And I think actually it was always going to be the case that even in a year or two after COVID, people were a little bit hesitant about travelling internationally. It's only really in the last year, 18 months, that COVID is totally out of our system. So I think it was always going to be the case that we're going to have a delayed response. But nonetheless, this is more evidence that the world we've come into post-COVID is slightly different to the world we went into. We spoke last week about how domestic travel has, we think, because there's no definitive numbers, seen less business class travellers than before. And that's obviously due to a rise of video calling and business people being more confident to do deals over Zoom than they would have done previously. But yeah, interesting that we've got less visitors overall, but the ones that are coming are spending more money.
Yeah, and we've also got the cost of living.
Yeah.
As we've mentioned, there's the situation in Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East. So there's a variety of factors that have gone into this. But it has been interesting to see international recovery outstrip, in a lot of cases, the domestic recovery.
Yeah, and also I think we're seeing like more routes and more travel from places like China as well. And again, that's pent up demand that China closed for an awful long time. But the international market has kind of almost reset itself in a different way.
Particularly from Asia, we remarked earlier in the year that travel from Asia is surging. It's its highest ever levels, which is compared to capacity to and from the US, which is slumping for a variety of reasons that, for Brian's sake, we won't get into.
Yes. Right, well, we've dealt with that. What's up next?
Well, there was another Qantas story that came out this morning that we should probably address. Big theft of Qantas customer data in a cyber attack.
This sounds it's not interesting, terrible, but this sounds very
But it's also interesting.
Yeah.
So there was a cyber criminal targeted a Qantas call center. They gained access to a third-party platform that's used for customer service. So the breach has been contained. There's no impact on operations
They're in
or
lockdown.
safety.
They're in lockdown. Everyone's gone back at home, yeah.
So the Qantas says all Qantas systems remain secure, but data that has been stolen would include customers' names, email addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, frequent flyer numbers. However, in this system, they don't have credit card details, personal financial information, and passport details. They don't have frequent flyer account. So no frequent flyer accounts were compromised. No passwords, pins, or login details have been accessed. So small mercies there. But there are 6 million customers that have service records in that third-party platform. And it's more bad news for Qantas.
Yeah, I mean, two things I'll say that. Firstly, you think of all the streaming services we sign up to, all the subscriptions that everyone now has. Our data in terms of phone numbers, email and stuff is everywhere. Almost everyone has at some point had some of their data hacked. It's almost like there's not much you can do about it in today's world. I also feel a little bit sorry for Qantas and other companies to get hacked, because the immediate suspicion, I think, of ordinary consumers is to blame the company. Like, why didn't you have better security protocols? But in reality, I always think if someone's determined enough to get some data, they're going to, and there's only so much customers will do. Like you say, it is kind of bad news for Qantas, but I also think that they've jumped on this quickly. They've made a public announcement, and these things unfortunately just do happen. It isn't credit card data, we think at the moment, so that's the main thing. So yeah, it is another piece of bad news for Qantas, but I do think as these things go on, the public will become more and more forgiving of them.
Yeah, one can only hope, and I guess it would help that no financial information has been taken. But I believe Qantas is offering identity protection services, so identity protection advice and resources to those people who may have been affected. So there's a specialist hotline. I believe you can find it on the Qantas website. We've put it in our story. So if you are worried that your identity data has been leaked, go check out that hotline.
Excellent, good public service announcement there. Right, what's up next? We're rattling through them now. I fear we're running out of things to talk about.
Have we taken just one break or two, Adam, at this point?
We've only taken the one. We're in a world of trouble. Okay, welcome back. So the show is falling off a cliff, or we're running out of interesting things to talk about. It is a dire situation. Jake, have we got anything left to talk about to pad out this third section of the show?
There was something that you covered.
That's a low blow, isn't it?
A former CEO of Tiger Air is going to be tasked with ensuring that Melbourne Airport's rail link gets built on time.
So this is, I think I've got the name right, Merrin McArthur?
Merrin McArthur.
So Merrin McArthur was a former CEO of Tiger Air, and she appeared on this show, or on the Australian Aviation Podcast, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, which was then hosted by Hannah Dowling when she worked here. And basically she appeared on the podcast to talk about how she kind of transformed Tiger Air from what she sort of saw as a very kind of male-dominated organisation at the top to being a much more diverse organisation. She talked very candidly about how people, she sort of almost felt that because she was a woman, people weren't really listening to her. They didn't necessarily take her seriously. So she had to kind of shove through these reforms. And from all we know, did a very, very good job, not just in that, but also in running Tiger as well at the kind of end of its life. She's now off as a founder and CEO, I believe, of a kind of smaller Canadian airline, but she's also got her fingers in a few different pies. So she's now been brought in to run the steering committee for Melbourne Airport Rail Link. Now, the steering committee is kind of mumbo jumbo. They're not necessarily placing money and making decisions, but their job is to kind of keep everyone in check and try and make sure this rail link, which has been talked about for decades, actually happens. Now, the reason this is significant is that the latest delay it's had, which I think could have shoved it back 4 years, was due to an argument over whether the main kind of train station at Melbourne Airport will be built overground or underground.
Or wombling free.
Or wombling. Did you get the wombles in Australia?
I think we got it on like Foxtel.
Oh,
we had it on Foxtel.
Excellent. Anyway, so basically, during one of the delays, the airport kind of got involved and said, well, now we've got a delay. Should we not think twice about having an underground station? Whereas the state of Victoria basically turned around and said, no, stick to the plan. It's got to be an overground station. Eventually, they got some independent person who came in and
Neil
said,
Scales.
Sorry about that, Neil. Basically said, stop squabbling, we're going to stick to the plan. And eventually the airport kind of capitulated or said, all right, we're going to do that. But nonetheless, so they've created this steering committee. And when Neil came in, he said, what we're going to do is create a steering committee. All the senior figures will be on it. So senior figures from the airport, from the state government, from the federal government, from all different stakeholders. And they'll get together and meet regularly in order to kind of keep things in check and keep this project moving forward. Merrin MacArthur has been appointed to head this in a kind of independent capacity. There is a quote which I'm hoping Jake has up on the screen with him, though he may not do, where it basically said that she was brought in to kind of ensure a collaborative
and constructive environment.
Which is a wonderful choice of words. Basically, she's been put in there to stop them squabbling. She's been put in there to sort them all out. So while she's not directly responsible for whether the rail goes ahead, she's been put there to smooth out any potential arguments between the different key stakeholders. Now, whether they listen to the Australian Aviation Podcast, I don't know. But on the surface, it does seem that they've made a very, very, very good choice. Obviously, Merrin has a very detailed understanding of the complexities of the Australian aviation market. I think she's also had other kind of transport and infrastructure roles. She's a little bit separate from what's going on at the moment, so she would seem like an ideal choice. The problem we've had with the airport rail, which we talk about frequently, they've been talking about this thing for decades and decades and decades. I remember when Scott Morrison and Dan Andrews kind of made a virtual announcement during COVID they were going to do this. Still, progress has been slow. I think they've begun work on one of the stations, if I'm correct.
Sunshine Station. So this is I think they've done. It's at least planning work on the expansion to Sunshine Station, which will be the connection. Sunshine Station already exists. For those of you who live in Melbourne, you will know this. But
ironic, it's called Sunshine Station in Melbourne.
It is. So maybe it's an aspirational thing.
Yeah.
So Sunshine Station is going to be sort of expanded and overhauled to integrate the airport rail link into the system. So you won't have to change at Sunshine Station to get from Melbourne Airport directly into the city. You can go straight through, but Sunshine Station will be the main interchange for anyone sort of coming through that suburban network and wants to go into the rail link. So it's not like a Western Sydney Airport Metro situation where you've got to change trains at St Mary's. This will be fully integrated. And so I think preliminary works and design and planning have begun on that.
Yeah, so I think the hope is that it would open sometime early in the next decade, though I'll kind of believe it when I see it. But nonetheless, the appointment of someone to head the steering committee was kind of quite a big announcement. Right, we're probably on desperately low on news stories now, aren't we?
We did have a interesting story that came to us from the ATSB.
Yes, we do need to talk about this.
So there was, in October 2023, there was a Robinson R66 helicopter that crashed in Providence Bay, which is near Hawk's Nest in New South Wales, sort of near Newcastle. Now, the ATSB has released its final report into this incident. Apparently, according to the ATSB's final report, one of the major factors, and there were a number of factors, the design of the helicopter factored into it, but one of the major factors was that the pilot was flying too fast for the conditions and was distracted. Quoting from the final report, the autopilot was engaged, and the pilot was, quote, occupied with non-flying related tasks, specifically mobile phone use and the consumption of food and beverages. And there's footage from the cockpit camera. So the R66 has a camera in the cockpit that looks onto the pilot and looks out through the front windscreens. Shows the pilot with food, holding food in the right hand, operating the controls with the left hand. According to the ATSB, flying on autopilot at an indicated airspeed of 115 knots, 45 knots above the manufacturer's maximum recommended speed for flight in significant turbulence. The speed significantly increased the uncommanded right roll rate, so it hit turbulence. There was this low G scenario, rolled to the right. It reduced the time available for the pilot to respond by applying a gentle left-aft cyclic input to reload the main rotor disc. Very technical helicopter terms there. If you know what that means, congratulations. In addition, the pilot had been eating and had food in their right hand, and so they used their left hand to manipulate the cyclic, reducing their ability to slow the helicopter in a timely manner using coordinated flight control inputs. Instead, the pilot progressively applied increasing left cyclic during the right roll, increasing the risk of an extreme teetering event where the spindles of the main rotor contact the main rotor shaft, precipitating a breakup. So the helicopter then broke up in midair, crashed into Providence Bay. The pilot was killed. So, yeah, some of this came down to the design of the helicopter, but a lot of it, or a fair bit of it at least, was due to the pilot's actions. Look, we've all, gotten Maccas in the car and fished a couple of chips out of the bag while we were driving, but maybe not the wisest thing in a helicopter.
No, and the ATSB here, and we make this point every time we talk about them, is that they have a philosophy of kind of no blame reports. So they don't actually name anybody in the reports, only kind of like their job titles or their roles. And the entire reason they do an investigation is not to blame or prosecute people, but so that we can learn from those mistakes. Now, clearly, the photo that they provided on the media release, you can see the kind of...
So this was a frame from the video.
Yeah, exactly. It was a frame from the video in the cockpit. You could see the weather's quite atrocious. You can see that, this person is effectively eating and is distracted. Obviously, if you're the family of that person who's obviously very sadly died, that's going to be a very, very hard thing to take, because clearly when they look back at that incident, that will be the sort of line they remember. So the ATSB have obviously had a choice here about whether they were to publicise this aspect of it, or whether to maybe play that down. They've obviously taken a decision that in order to prevent future accidents, it was important, no matter the distress that might have been caused, it was important to publicise this. Now, I would say that the average person looking at this from the outside would go, why would you be flying a helicopter while you're eating? That's crazy. But at the same time, and not to say that isn't a bad thing to do, if you are an experienced pilot and you have flown a lot of times and you're in a situation which you don't think is particularly alarming, then probably that sort of thing goes on more than you'd imagine. I made the point to Jake earlier today that, when you learn to drive a car, you have your hands at 10 to 2. Everybody, bar Jake, to be fair to him, gives up on 10 to 2 almost immediately and put one hand on top of the wheel. Most people, even though I don't think most people are staring at their phones all the time, clearly a lot of people will occasionally do that. Clearly a lot of people are fiddling around with the touch screen and stuff. So quickly
changing the Spotify, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So even the best of drivers, bad habits creep in. And so if you've flown enough, you could see how these bad habits creep in. So while it may seem alarming, you could see how this happened. That obviously doesn't necessarily mean that this pilot was a reckless pilot at all, but obviously made a very, very bad call. The ATSB have obviously made the point of publicising this aspect, probably because I think this happens more often than people would assume, particularly if a pilot is on their own. So it is a very, very tragic thing that's happened. It is quite a shocking photo, but I hope that does reinforce the message to the people that read our story and from other sources. Obviously, you've got to be alert. Things can change very quickly in the sky without you knowing.
Complacency kills.
Exactly.
And we did, I want to pull this up as well. We did have someone commenting on Facebook saying that the ATSB is using them and their throughout for the pilot, and that means that the Transportation Safety Board has gone woke. No, they haven't. The ATSB uses non-gendered language, has done since, I think, 2020 in its reports, because it's part of their policy of de-identifying individuals. If you know the individual's gender, it is easier to identify them, so they don't use the gender or anything that could specifically come back to the individual. Companies they will identify, not individuals. The ATSB has not gone woke. They are trying to keep the identity of the pilot a secret. You will notice in the photo, the face of the pilot is blurred. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Well, yeah, very professional. Right, have we got one more thing to talk about before we wrap up this?
Well, I was up in Newcastle last week.
You were indeed.
I was in Newcastle.
I quite like Newcastle, actually. It's all right. It's just like a much quieter version of Sydney. Lovely beach, nice people.
Well, I was near Newcastle.
Oh, all right.
So I was in the vicinity of Newcastle. I was out at Beresfield first at the Rathmines Catalina Association. So shout out to those guys who have been fixing up a Catalina bomber. It's a volunteer group fixing up a Catalina bomber that was, I believe, used by the United States Navy during World War II. And they've been having, it's done in cooperation with the RAF. So when this is all finished, it will be displayed at Fighter World at Williamtown, which is like the sort of the RAF, one of the RAF museums out there. And they've been working with students from TAFE New South Wales who are completing their, I believe it's a Certificate 2 in aero skills. They've been learning to work with their hands, work with the metal and all of the parts and reassemble this bomber, which is a great sort of initiative from both ends. The volunteers who are mostly a bunch of old blokes, as these guys tend to be. They are getting some extra help, and the students are learning valuable skills and skills that could be applied if they move on to their Certificate 4 in aero skills or look for a career further in the aviation industry. So feature will be coming on that in the next Australian Aviation magazine. Look out for that. Got some lovely photos.
Obviously, I've seen a number of these projects happen over the years, and they work for a number of reasons. One, you maybe get a rejuvenated aircraft at the end of it. Secondly, you get...
And this will be, by the way, used for a static display.
Static display. You get young people and old people, or older people that learn new skills that they may have done anyway. But also it's an opportunity for some camaraderie. It's a social thing to meet people with a shared passion. So everyone's a kind of winner in these things. So I think these things are very, very good. I would say more than most countries, actually, Australia is really, really proud of its aviation history and goes to a lot of effort to kind of keep alive those aircraft, even if they're on a static display, because obviously it's seeing these aircraft on the ground or the sky that inspires the next generation to get involved. So I think it's a really good initiative. Yeah.
And after that, went over to Newcastle Airport, spoke with Link Horton, who is the new CEO of Newcastle Airport. He got his feet under the desk a little earlier this year and got to see inside the new terminal.
Does it look swanky? Is it nice?
It does look swanky. It looks very swanky. You saw the swankly. Looks very swankly. Swankly, the adverbial form of swanky. So they have swankly outfitted the terminal. It has a new aero bridge. It's got a big new interior that can host a lot of passengers. They're sort of redoing the downstairs area. They've got new baggage belts and things like that.
Love a baggage belt.
Love baggage belts. They're one of the best ways to get your baggage. One of the only ways to get your baggage. But this is sort of expected to be open to its first passengers within like a few weeks, sort of like
very soon,
sort of like a soft opening, where passengers will be able to come in and through the sort of new terminal domestically, with the aim for it to be fully open by the time that these Jetstar flights to Bali start in October. And Newcastle Airport has this big ambition to be, a hub for travel in the Hunter region. And I asked Link Horton as well. I asked him about potential bleed over from Sydney. Could people from Sydney go up to Newcastle? And he said, they'd love that. It's not the main aim, but if they get sort of bleed out from Sydney as opposed to bleeding passengers to Sydney, which is what they do right now because there's not a lot of international service. There's no international services going to Newcastle Airport, and domestic services are limited. So if they're getting people going up from Sydney, recognizing that it's a better option, or a different option or a cheaper option, then that would be great. He did speak as well about, hopefully, if this high-speed rail project gets off the ground.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
Yeah, so if the Sydney-Newcastle high-speed rail is ever finally completed, he'd hope that there would be, a stop or something near Newcastle Airport, because the public transport links are a little limited right now. They've got mainly buses going out there, and I think it's a bit of a trek from Newcastle city centre. But if the high-speed rail goes through, then they would love, services connecting to Newcastle Airport, and that would, give people in Sydney another alternative, considering that Western Sydney is going to be opening up next year, but another alternative to going to Sydney Airport. And, getting some passengers in from north of Newcastle as well, up the north coast, who might otherwise, have to trek to Brisbane or down to Sydney or to anywhere else. So it it's looking good. It's
Yeah.
looking good from the inside. And we did a whole podcast, and so hopefully that'll be coming out as well in the next 2 weeks. Whether it will be a regular podcast or a premium, we'll have to see. But I did a nice long sit-down chat with CEO of Newcastle Airport and a bit of a tour of the new terminal.
Yeah, and probably this is not aviation chat, but I always find it incredible that we keep on saying that, people keep saying that, Sydney's full to bursting, and obviously they're kind of building out west. But you've got Newcastle and Wollongong, north and south, which are ripe for development. But what's holding those places back is you don't have a decent train link. You've got some clattered old bangers that take an absolute age. If you had a quick link, that would be transformative for all those three places. And it does make sense now. It's certainly an argument for the rail link, is we're going to have, Newcastle Airport with its kind of souped up runway, with its revamped terminal, with all of this kind of stuff. That's another argument for doing it, because it's like the kind of multiplying benefits of doing these things.
Extraordinary experience at Newcastle Airport as well, because in the middle of the interview we had like an Air Force fighter jet taking off for exercises or something. Yeah, it was very loud and did disrupt the interview just a little bit. And just imagine sitting at Newcastle Airport, waiting for your Jetstar flight for Bali to take off, and there's just a like
That's
an F-35
brilliant.
or something going down the runway. So it shares space with a RAF base, which has its pros and cons, but the views you can't fault.
You're pretty secure, to be fair.
Yeah.
No one's going to mess with you if you've got a couple of F-35s knocking about.
Yeah, and I did see a QantasLink E190 sort of pull up at the terminal, unload passengers. I'm not sure where it was coming from, but there was an E190 there, so got to see a plane not coming through the near aero bridge. They were still going in through the downstairs section, but it's looking good, Adam. It's looking good.
It's looking good.
And you see, high-speed rail and aviation, they don't need to be at odds. They can work hand in hand in a beautiful synthesis of steel and aluminium and carbon fiber and whatever it else planes and trains are made of these days.
What a magical note to end the show on. Beautifully wrapped up. So yes, we will wrap up the show. Jake, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Say goodbye.
No.
It's not very nice, is it? And I'll say goodbye. We'll be back on the show the same time next week. But for now, from me, Jake, and goodbye.
See ya.